Welcome to our channel Big Cats Urban Ontario. Sit back, relax and grab some popcorn. We're here to talk about big cats. What is being seen in the wilderness in Canada, Ontario? What are these big majestic cats being spotted in the wild and in urban areas? We know wild cougars are present and exist in Ontario, Canada. Let's break down the evolutionary timeline of these amazing animals. Mountain lions evolved from a common ancestor with the cheetah and other animals between 5 and 9 million years ago. The lineage leading to the modern puma entered North America through the Bering Land Bridge approximately 8 million years ago. Their evolutionary timeline starting 8.5 million years ago. The common ancestor of various cat lineages, including the puma, migrated from Asia to North America across the Bering Land Bridge 5 to 9 million years ago. The puma lineage diverged from its common ancestor. 6 to 4 million years ago, felines, including the ancestors of the puma, made their way to South America. 300,000 years ago, the oldest known puma fossils date to this period. Scientifically known as puma concolor, also called cougar, mountain lion, catamount and panther, is a large cat and top apex predator, as you can see it taking down this deer with ease. It's native to the Americas. It inhabits North, Central and South America, making it the most widely distributed wild terrestrial mammal in the Western Hemisphere, and one of the most widespread in the world. Its range spans from the Yukon and British Columbia to Ontario and all provinces of Canada and areas in the western United States. Further south, its range extends through Mexico to the Amazon rainforest and the southern Andes Mountains. It is an adaptable generalist species occurring in most American habitat types. It prefers habitats with dense underbrush and rocky areas for stalking, but also lives in open areas. The cougar is a member of the puma genus, like I said earlier. The fossil record of pumas is not extensive, with the oldest known fossils dating back about 300,000 years. While the evolutionary origin of the puma dates back millions of years, their presence on the North American landscape has been for thousands of years. Due to the expanding human population, cougar ranges increasingly overlap with areas inhabited by humans. Attacks on humans are very rare, as cougar prey recognition is a learned behavior, and they do not generally recognize humans as prey. In a 10-year study in New Mexico of wild cougars who were not habituated to humans, the animals did not exhibit threatening behavior to researchers who approached closely, except in 6% of cases. 14/6 of those were females with cubs. Attacks on people, livestock and pets may occur when a cougar habituates to humans or is in a condition of severe starvation. Attacks are most frequent during late spring and summer when juvenile cougars leave their mothers in search for new territory. Between 1890 and 1990 in North America, there were 53 reported confirmed attacks on humans, resulting in 48 non-fatal injuries and 10 deaths of humans. The total is greater than 53 because some attacks had more than one victim. By 2004, the count had climbed to 88 attacks and 20 deaths. Within North America, the distribution of attacks is not uniform. The heavily populated state of California saw a dozen attacks from 1986 to 2004, after just 3 from 1890 to 1985, including 3 fatalities. In March 2024, 2 brothers in California pictured here were attacked by a male cougar, with one being fatally wounded. It was the state's first fatal attack in 20 years. Washington state was the site of a fatal attack in 2018, its first since 1924. Lightly populated New Mexico reported an attack in 2008, the first there since 1974. As with many predators, a cougar may attack if cornered, if a fleeing human stimulates their instinct to chase, or if a person plays dead. Standing still may cause the cougar to consider a person easy prey. Exaggerating the threat to the animal through intense eye contact, loud shouting, and any other action to appear larger and more menacing may make the animal retreat. Fighting back with sticks and rocks, or even bare hands, is often effective in persuading an attacking cougar to disengage. When cougars do attack, they usually employ their characteristic neck bite, attempting to position their teeth between the vertebrae and into the spinal cord. Neck, head, and spinal injuries are common and sometimes fatal. Children are at greatest risk of attack and least likely to survive an encounter. Detailed research into attacks before 1991 showed that 64% of all victims, and almost all fatalities, were children. The same study showed the highest proportion of attacks to have occurred in British Columbia, particularly on Vancouver Island, where cougar populations are especially dense. Preceding attacks on humans, cougars display aberrant behavior, such as activity during daylight hours, a lack of fear of humans, and stalking humans. There have sometimes been incidents of pet cougars mauling people. Research on new wildlife collars may reduce human-animal conflicts by predicting when and where predatory animals hunt. This may save the lives of humans, pets, and livestock, as well as the lives of these large predatory mammals that are important to the balance of ecosystems. People. In legend, they defended people against jaguars. The 19th century naturalists Felix de Azara, 1281, and William Henry Hudson, 1291, thought that attacks on people, even in children or sleeping adults, did not happen. Hudson, citing anecdotal evidence from hunters, claimed that pumas were positively inhibited from attacking people, even in self-defense. Attacks on humans, although exceedingly rare, have occurred. An early authenticated non-fatal case occurred near Lake Viedma, Patagonia in 1877 when a female mauled the Argentine scientist Francisco P. Moreno. Moreno afterward showed the scars to Theodore Roosevelt. In this instance, however, Moreno had been wearing a guanaco hide poncho round his neck and head as protection against the cold. In Patagonia, the guanaco is the puma's chief prey animal. Another authenticated case occurred in 1997 in Iguazu National Park in northeastern Argentina when the 20-month-old son of a ranger was killed by a female puma. Forensic analysis found specimens of the child's hair and clothing fibers in the animal's stomach. The coati is the puma's chief prey in this area. Despite prohibitory signs, coatis are hand-fed by tourists in the park, causing unnatural approximation between cougars and humans. On March 13, 2012, Erica Cruz, a 23-year-old shepherdess, was found dead in a mountainous area near Rosario de Lerma, Salta Province, in northwestern Argentina. Claw incisions, which severed a jugular vein, indicated that the attacker was a felid. Differential diagnosis ruled out other possible perpetrators. During the early years of ranching, cougars were considered on par with wolves in destructiveness. According to figures in Texas in 1990, 86 calves, 0.0006% of Texas's 13.4 million cattle and calves, 253 mohair goats, 302 mohair kids, 445 sheep, 0.02% of Texas's 2 million sheep and lambs, and 562 lambs were confirmed to have been killed by cougars that year. In Nevada in 1992, cougars were confirmed to have killed 9 calves, 1 horse, 4 foals, 5 goats, 318 sheep, and 400 lambs. In both reports, sheep were the most frequently attacked. Some instances of surplus killing have resulted in the deaths of 20 sheep in one attack. A cougar's killing bite is applied to the back of the neck, head or throat, and the cat inflicts puncture marks with its claws, usually seen on the sides and underside of the prey, sometimes also shredding the prey as it holds on. Coyotes also typically bite the throat, but the work of a cougar is generally clean, while bites inflicted by coyotes and dogs leave ragged edges. The size of the tooth puncture marks also helps distinguish kills made by cougars from those made by smaller predators. Remedial hunting appears to have the paradoxical effect of increased livestock predation and complaints of human-cougar conflicts. In a 2013 study, the most important predictor of cougar problems was the remedial hunting of cougars the previous year. Each additional cougar on the landscape increased predation and human cougar complaints by 5%, but each animal killed during the previous year increased complaints by 50%. The grace and power of the cougar have been widely admired in the cultures of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The Inca city of Cusco is reported to have been designed in the shape of a cougar, and the animal also gave its name to both Inca regions and people. The Moche people often represented the cougar in their ceramics. The sky and thunder god of the Inca, Viracocha, has been associated with the animal. In North America, mythological descriptions of the cougar have appeared in the stories of the Hokack language, Ho-Chunk or Winnebago, of Wisconsin and Illinois and the Cheyenne, among others. To the Apache and Wallapai of the southwestern United States, the wail of the cougar was a harbinger of death. The Algonquins and Ojibwe believed that the cougar lived in the underworld and was wicked, whereas it was a sacred animal among the Cherokee. The North American cougar, Puma concolor cougar, is a cougar subspecies in North America. It is the biggest cat in North America. North American jaguars are fairly small, and the second largest cat in the New World. It was once common in eastern North America and is still prevalent in the western half of the continent. This subspecies includes populations in western Canada, the western United States, Florida, Mexico, and Central America, and possibly South America, northwest of the Andes Mountains. And now back in Ontario, present time. It thus includes the extirpated eastern cougar and extant Florida panther populations. The eastern cougar, or eastern puma, Puma concolor cougar, is a subspecies designation proposed in 1946 for cougar populations in eastern North America. The subspecies, as described in 1946, was declared extinct by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 2011. However, the 1946 taxonomy is now in question. The Canadian Wildlife Service has taken no position on the taxonomy. Cougars are currently common in western North America and may be expanding their range. Individuals are occasionally seen as vagrants in eastern North America. In 2015, a group of students and scholars at the Pennsylvania State University formed a research group to sequence the mitochondrial DNA genome of this extinct subspecies. The Nittany Lion Genome Project took samples from preserved eastern cougar skins to obtain DNA for sequencing and further analysis. A consensus exists among wildlife officials in 21 eastern states that the eastern cougar population has been extirpated from the eastern United States. The federal government of Canada has taken no position on the subspecies' existence, continued or otherwise, and terms the evidence inconclusive. The FWS reviewed all available research and other information and concluded in 2011 that the eastern cougar has been extinct since the 1930s and recommended that it be removed from its list of endangered species. The agency used the 1946 taxonomy of S.P. Young and E.A. Goldman in defining the eastern cougar subspecies, while noting that some taxonomists in recent years have classified all North American cougars within a single subspecies. The agency's 2011 report said, "A full taxonomic analysis is necessary to conclude that a revision to the Young and Goldman 1946 taxonomy is warranted." The agency acknowledged the occasional presence of cougars in eastern North America, indicating confirmed sightings are wanderers from western breeding ranges or escaped captives. Its review expressed skepticism that breeding populations exist north of Florida, noting, among other things, the lack of consistent roadkill evidence comparable to known cougar ranges. However, the presence of cougars in the wild, whatever their taxonomy or origin, in eastern North America continues to be controversial. Various residents of eastern North America, especially in rural regions, have reported as many as 10,000 cougar sightings since the 1960s, and many continue to believe the subspecies has survived. Bruce Wright, a wildlife biologist and former student of Aldo Leopold, popularized the idea that a breeding population of cougars persisted in northern New England and the Maritime provinces through a series of articles and books published between 1960 and 1973. Wright based his idea mostly on unconfirmed sightings, track photos and plaster casts, and photographs of pumas killed in New Brunswick in 1932 and in Maine in 1938. Since the 1970s, privately run groups have formed in nearly every state to compile and investigate records of cougar sightings. Many of these groups are convinced that breeding populations of cougars exist throughout the region. Large numbers of cougar sightings have been reliably reported throughout the Midwest. Until around 1990, reports of mountain lions in the Midwest and East were highly influenced by the Bigfoot factor, according to Mark Dowling, co-founder of the Eastern Cougar Network. "None of it was really real," he said in an interview, but the situation has changed dramatically since that time, according to Dowling, whose group collects and disseminates data on the shifting mountain lion population. Dowling said in 2003 that sightings in the eastern half of the nation, including Michigan, etc., were almost certainly escaped captives, but he added that the notion that western cougars will eventually reach New Jersey is a reasonable prediction, in part due to increased populations of white-tailed deer, Odocoileus virginianus. However, some of these cougars found far in the east were established to be of western origin. As noted in an opinion piece by David Barron in the New York Times concerning a cougar killed by a car in Connecticut in 2011, recolonization is entirely dependent upon dispersing subadult females, who typically range far less than subadult males. While subadult females with Black Hills DNA have been documented since 2015 in Tennessee, Missouri, and Iowa, as of 2018, the easternmost breeding colony north of Florida is the Niobrara River Valley in central Nebraska. A study in 2016 by several management and wildlife experts found that by reintroducing cougars to their historic range in the northeast U.S., white-tailed deer density and deer vehicle collisions, DVCs, could be reduced by 22%, which could prevent 21,400 human injuries, 155 fatalities, and $2.13 billion in preventive costs within just 30 years of reintroduction. The 8 eastern states with the biggest areas of viable cougar habitat, as analyzed in the study, were New Hampshire and West Virginia, both 75%, Vermont and Maine, both 65%, Massachusetts, 33%, Connecticut, 32%, New York, 31%, and Pennsylvania, 29%. A 1998 study for Canada's National Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada concluded that there is no objective evidence, actual cougar specimens or other unequivocal confirmation, for the continuous presence of cougars since the last century anywhere in eastern Canada or the eastern United States outside of Florida. Based on this, in 1999, the magazine Canadian Geographic reported that for the previous half-century, a debate over whether or not Canada's eastern woods host a cougar species all its own has raged. Now the answer appears to be no. Experts say past sightings were cases of mistaken identification. However, the Canadian Committee's website as of 2011 says that data are insufficient to draw conclusions regarding the subspecies' continued existence, or even whether it ever existed at all. In March 2011, an official with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources stated that cougars are present in the province. This official said individual cougars in Ontario may be escaped zoo animals or pets, or may have migrated from the western parts of North America. As in the eastern U.S., numerous cougar sightings have been reported by Canadians in Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. The privately run Ontario Puma Foundation estimates that 550 pumas are in the province and their numbers are increasing steadily to a sustainable population, 491. However, no evidence of breeding has been documented east of Saskatchewan. In 2011, the FWS opened an extensive review into the status of the eastern cougar. In 2015, the agency determined the eastern cougar no longer warranted protection under the Endangered Species Act and planned to delist it. On January 22, 2018, the delisting became final and they were officially declared extinct. According to the Center for Biological Diversity, the eastern cougar was extinct well before it was protected under the Endangered Species Act, as was the case with 8 of the other 10 species that have been delisted for extinction. But surprisingly enough, in Ontario, Canada, from 2018 to present a rise in cougar sightings has been happening. Cougars are being spotted all over Canada, including Ontario and Quebec. We believe that the eastern cougars survived and never became extinct. After studying their population patterns with amazing help from the community, we have come to the realization that these animals never left. Recent evidence suggests that the cougar, Puma concolor, has returned to New Brunswick, Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario. An abundance of sightings have been reported for many decades throughout south-central Ontario, but genetic confirmation has been confounded by a lack of carcasses or DNA. A thought, what if they aren't black cougars but black pumas? If South American cougars have been proven to be roaming Quebec and breeding with North American cougars, could that mix have brought melanism into the genes? Southern Ontario's cougars gotta be coming from Quebec. Based on this chart, they would be 60 years off from being in Southern Ontario if they were from the Rockies. So, basically, Thunder Bay's source is Manitoba, Sault Ste. Marie, Manitoulin source is Michigan. Rest of Ontario has to be Quebec. I wonder how far back this rule of 14 years would take us. Either the middle of nowhere, northern Quebec, where they barely survive the winters, or almost the Atlantic coast, maybe? I think I know the source now. It can't be Ottawa River, Quebec, where they survived, but like mid-Quebec on the edge of their range's border. DNA recovered by the Quebec authorities came back as being from Central and South America. Could be both. Either way, they gotta be coming from far, far northern mid-Quebec area, and if they were stocked, it would have had to have been decades ago, and it would have had to have been a ton of them for it to work. Basically, in order for this all to make sense, these animals would have had to originate over 1,000 kilometers away in remote Quebec, where no white people lived at the time. Somewhere they never were recorded or barely recorded living like Lake Albonel current suspicion of the source. So, after hours of research and gathering data, I would now believe the majority of southern Ontario's cougars have originated from remote parts of Quebec. Very likely, the eastern cougar was never fully wiped out from that province like it likely was in Ontario. This would explain why the north shore of Lake Ontario has a tremendously greater amount of sightings than Sudbury or Muskoka. Even when considering the human population differences in those areas, I suspect they survived in isolated remote pockets, moved into protected reserves in Quebec like La Vérendrye Wildlife Reserve or Kabonga Backcountry, and then moved toward the Ottawa River and found safety in the eastern portions of Algonquin Park before making their way toward Lake Ontario. This likely happened over a course of 100 years. When also comparing my map to one created by the former Ontario Puma Foundation, it seems we both are on the same page when it comes to the population hotspots and sense of traffic. No proof, but this is what the evidence the public has given us so far. More proof of them being in Quebec is needed though. But for now I want you all to meet the black cougar, Canada's own Tasmanian tiger. This part of the video is going to determine which species are responsible for these black panther sightings in Ontario. To help eliminate some of our 4 animal suspects, we are going to investigate the video evidence we have so far extremely carefully and seek the advice of wildlife and animal professionals. That's why I am heading to the Kilman Zoo to ask for their knowledge on which species are kept the most often in captivity in Canada. Established leopards are not kept, and all Indian leopard captivity is illegal. Hardly any public zoos even have them. Saying that Indian leopards have been illegally smuggled to Canada, and have exclusively been bred in the black variety, and have been released all over North America, sounds like a conspiracy theory without any proof to back it up. Likely someone would have eventually gotten caught having at least one Indian leopard if this was so widespread, but nothing appears on the media. African leopards are easier to get but lack resistance to cold and are in short supply, and the black ones are a lot more rare in the African subspecies. Jaguars are the black cat, most often kept in captivity, however resistance to cold is limited. However, some have been documented escaping private collections in Ontario, unlike leopards. For these reasons I believe it is time to say that we likely now do truly have our culprits. We are not dealing with just one cat species, but we are dealing with 2. This would also explain why black cat sightings are so high. Let me explain both in detail now. Here is our jaguar explanation. Jaguars are the black cat most often kept in captivity, however resistance to cold is limited. However, some have been documented escaping private collections in Ontario, unlike leopards. However, the more interesting cat requires a lot of explaining. I have a ton of investigating to do on this to help refine my understanding of this. However, even though it is early in the investigation and these views could be subject to change as more details come in, I will share what I suspect so far. You see, the extreme rare eastern cougar black gene being more common is actually thanks to man. Let me explain. Have you ever heard of selective culling? So the idea is 1,000 red shrimp versus 50 blue shrimp. Even though these shrimp could have red offspring, the blue genetics will have become a lot more common. How does this relate to cougars? Well, you see, in the 1800s, eastern cougars had a price on their head, a bounty that led to their extinction. One dead cougar gets rewarded with something to the hunter from the government. This is what led to their suspected extinction around the early 1900s ES. However, it may be worth noting that these hunters were unlikely to shoot at an animal which did not resemble the bountied eastern cougars in question. No identifiable cougar, no reward. Hence, whenever hunters may have seen an extremely rare black variation, they spared the animal suspecting it to be something else entirely. Basically, all of the brown cougars got shot, and the extremely rare black ones were spared, if even spotted because of their elusiveness. This in theory they may have forced the black variety to continue the eastern cougar populations if in some remote northern areas they were able to meet, where these rare eastern cougar genetics have been carried down to our day. In theory, as cougars from the western portions of North America continue expanding their territory eastward like they have eventually with the new genetics, these black fur variations should return to their normal rare percentage. However, this truly is just a theory and more research needs to be done. What this would essentially mean is that the Facebook group Big Cats Urban Ontario and this new YouTube channel's work 6 months in has gathered enough evidence to discover a new animal unknown to science through the help of the community. In truth, as exciting as that is, I find it very difficult to believe I'm the first one to discover this. What to me is even more shocking than their existence is how they have been able to avoid being confirmed by science. Or have they? Brazil reports black pumas and BC government paper officially reports a black cougar. Clearly scientists have their wires crossed on this. So then why the confusion? The 2 main theories for this basically are that it is extreme negligence and uninterested in this topic, or it's a cover-up. Could it be negligence? Perhaps it could be. Government agencies' jobs aren't really focused on studying nature as much as they are preserving wildlife parks, monitoring renewable resources and making sure everyone is following the law. The truth is, managing wildlife is more often focused on managing people instead. Also, it would likely require cooperation from wildlife agencies all over the globe to prove this, an animal which North Americans sadly don't have much passion for. Or perhaps the government is very aware of black cougars being a real thing. However, maybe they feel the best way to protect these animals is to hide them for public knowledge. Or perhaps the best way to protect their own pocketbook. Could they perhaps be afraid that if it was public knowledge that these animals could turn black, that it would swell up public interest in financially protecting these animals? More research is truly needed to understand why the public has been kept in the dark from these animals. At this point in time, I would suspect 80% at least of all black panther sightings are black cougars, while the rest are released pets of melanistic jaguars. Hopefully, if I can gather undisputable evidence that cougars can turn melanistic, this will be the spark that starts having the public love these animals as much as I do. In the future, I see the black cougar being just as iconic for Canada as our Canadian goose or beaver, a true symbol of the mystery that Canada or Ontario contains if you just allow yourself to go out there and discover it. Guys, if you are ever out and see a big cat, brown, black, whatever color, if it's waist high, please don't keep it to yourself. Let us know. Contact us on Facebook group Big Cats Urban Ontario, or leave a comment down below in the comment section so we can add your sighting to our public Google Sightings map. We appreciate your time and hope you found this information informative. If you have found this new information to be thrilling, please like and subscribe for new updates in this series. Big Cats Canada. Now that we know our species, we are going to be traveling all over Ontario to search for proof of these animals being present here. If you have a sighting to report, reach out to Big Cats Urban Ontario. As always, thanks for watching and take care.